If the Terran chattel fails to appease the voracious sovereign, he will face the same fate as the others. Kalen Vane had no aspiration to become a paramour to an extraterrestrial monarch. Then again, he hadn't anticipated losing everything at the Orion's Nebula gaming den. Fate had a perverse sense of humor, and this particular jest was hurtling directly towards him at superluminal velocity. The confinement cell within the slaver vessel reverberated with the muted thrum of its drives. Kalen was seated on the frigid metal bench, his robust frame barely constrained by the threadbare cerulean undershirt clinging to his perspiration-dampened skin. His raven locks cascaded in disarray around his face, mirroring his dense, unkempt beard. The battered voidwalkers he wore had witnessed better epochs, much like their owner.
Reis, Terran, intont Grax, the hexapedal Centaurian slaver.
Her Radiance's shuttle has arrived.
Kaelen Rose, the restaurant's clinking.
Any possibility of negotiating a deferred payment arrangement? I assure you I'm creditworthy, I simply require additional time.
Silence.
Grax's mandibles clicked in vexation. You are fortunate that Sovereign Lyra even considered acquiring you. The others. He executed a slicing gesture across his throat with one of his upper limbs. The docking portal dilated with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a sleek, argent shuttle. 2 sentinels in crystalline armor materialized, flanking a statuesque, elegant figure that caused Kalen's breath to constrict in his throat. Sovereign Lyra moved with fluid elegance, her pallid opalescent skin appearing to shimmer beneath the harsh bay lights. Her protracted, undulating platinum tresses cascaded down her back like a glacial cascade, and her argent eyes pierced him with predatory intensity. The obsidian corset gown she donned, adorned with auric trim, left scant to the imagination, its plunging neckline drawing his gaze despite his better judgment.
This is a specimen.
Her voice was like nectar laced with venom. Indeed, your radiance, Grax prostrated himself, his carapace almost scraping the deck. A prime Terran male, as requested. Robust, virile, and, he paused suggestively, reportedly quite vigorous. The Sovereign circled Kalen with languid steps, her heels clicking against the plasteel deck. He felt like a prize stallion at auction but maintained his composure, meeting her gaze each time it intersected his. Her lips curved into a subtle, amused smile. You do not appear intimidated, Terran, she observed, halting before him. Fear is not my forte, your radiance, Kalen retorted with a subtle shrug. Besides, I reason that if you intend to terminate me, I might as well confront it standing tall. One of the sentinels advanced, raising his weapon.
You shall display proper reverence to Sovereign Lyra.
Lyra raised a hand, halting him. Nay, I find his candor stimulating. She reached out, tracing a digit along Kalen's jaw. Her touch was frigid, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine.
Tell me, do you comprehend why Epsilon you are here?
I have heard rumors, Kalen stated, maintaining his voice steady despite her proximity. Something pertaining to appeasing your radiance's particular appetites, and the fate of those who falter. Ah, so you are aware of my reputation. She smiled, revealing dentition that appeared just marginally too sharp. I have expended quite a few paramours. None have endured for longer than a night. Most, she gestured dismissively, did not survive the initial attempt. Kalen met her predatory gaze with his own. Well, your radiance, if this is destined to be my final night in this cosmos, I intend to render it memorable. The Sovereign's eyes widened marginally, then she threw back her head and laughed, the sound reverberating through the docking bay. Oh, I do favor this one. Grax, he possesses spirit. She turned to her sentinels. Escort him to my private chambers. Ensure he is suitably prepared. As the sentinels moved to escort him, she leaned in close, her lips almost brushing his ear. For your sake, Terran, I hope your confidence is not misplaced. It would be such a waste to execute someone so intriguing. The sentinels led Kalen away, but not before he caught one final glimpse of Sovereign Lyra. She was observing him with an expression that melded hunger with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or was it hope? Regardless, Kalen comprehended one certainty. This night would either be his last, or the genesis of something extraordinary. And he intended to give it everything he possessed. The preparatory procedure was surprisingly meticulous. Kalen was cleansed, groomed, and attired in what he could only characterize as the galaxy's most minimalist formal wear, black, silk-like trousers that left minimal to the imagination, and nothing else. Her radiance favors her entertainment accessible, elucidated the attendant, an androgynous being with iridescent skin and immaculate hygiene. Very thoughtful, Kalen muttered, running a hand through his now-tamed locks. They had trimmed his beard as well, though permitted him to retain it at his insistence. Any further survival tips? The attendant paused, glancing nervously at the portal. The others, they attempted too diligently to appease her, treating her as a deity. It irritated her. Interesting. Kalen filed that information away. Thank you for the tip. One further matter, the attendant appended, lowering their voice. Her previous favorites lasted longer when they elicited her laughter, but none survived past sunrise. Before Kalen could respond, the chamber portal swung inward.
Tu sentinels materialized, distinst from the preceding onus. Here radiance awaits.
The transit to the sovereign's private chambers felt akin to a march toward execution, which Kalen surmised it might very well be. The palace corridors were a labyrinth of crystalline architecture and hovering anti-gravity gardens, but he barely registered them. His mind was racing, formulating stratagems, discarding them, then conceiving novel ones. The sentinels halted before a colossal portal constructed of what appeared to be liquid metal.
Enter, commanded a voice from within.
The portals parted like quicksilver, and Kalen stepped through, into what had to be the most opulent bedchamber in the galaxy. The ceiling was a transparent dome showcasing the star-strewn firmament above. The walls shifted in hue like the aurora borealis, and in the epicenter stood a bed that could comfortably accommodate a dozen individuals. Sovereign Lyra reclined on a chaise lounge, having changed into something even more revealing, a gossamer gown that left naught to the imagination. Approach, Terran. Kalen approached, but not excessively close, maintaining eye contact.
You know, your radiance, idoposes Annahme.
She raised an eyebrow.
Oh? Du enlighten me.
Kalen Vane, though my acquaintances refer to me as Kalen. He offered her a wry smile. When I had acquaintances. Audacious of you to assume we shall be acquaintances, she purred, rising from the chaise with predatory grace. I do not befriend my meals. Interesting metaphor, Kalen retorted, standing his ground as she circled him. Though I have invariably discovered that meals are more gratifying when shared between equals. She halted before him, argent eyes narrowing. Equals? You dare. I dare suggest, he interrupted, cognizant that he was likely signing his death warrant but pressing forward regardless, that you are bored. Bored of sycophants and thralls who treat you as a deity instead of a woman. For a fleeting moment, there was absolute silence. Then, to his astonishment, Sovereign Lyra laughed, not the calculated laugh from earlier, but a genuine sound of amusement. Well, well, she said, trailing a digit down his chest, perhaps you shall prove more entertaining than the others, after all. That is the intention, Kalen retorted, seizing her hand and bringing it to his lips. Though I should forewarn you, I play to win.
Here I starkend with desire and challenge. Ten letse games commence, Kalen Vane.
As she pulled him toward the bed, Kalen realized he might have just procured himself a chance at survival. Now, he merely had to endure the night, and potentially alter the course of 2 civilizations in the process.
No pressure.
The first rays of dawn infiltrated through the transparent dome of Sovereign Lyra's chambers, casting iridescent patterns across the rumpled sheets. Kalen lay supine against the plush pillows, his sun-kissed skin contrasting sharply with the silvery bedding. Lyra propped herself up on one elbow, studying him with an intensity that would have unnerved a lesser individual. Still alive, she observed, trailing a digit along his collarbone. More than alive, actually. You seem energized. Kalen offered her his trademark wry smile. Disappointed, are you? Intrigued, she corrected, her argent eyes sparkling with something that wasn't quite predatory any longer. You are dissimilar from the others. They attempted to appease me to survive. You. She paused, searching for the appropriate verbiage. You acted as if survival was subordinate to enjoyment. Life's too fleeting to feign pleasure, he retorted, stretching languidly, even when death is on the line. The sovereign sat up, the sheets pooling around her waist, her pallid opalescent skin appearing to glow in the morning light. You know, in all my epochs, no one has ever. She gestured vaguely. Matched me, let alone exceeded my expectations.
First time for evating your radiance.
Lyra, she said suddenly.
Ven via alone, edres mes lyra.
Kalen raised an eyebrow. Moving swiftly, aren't we? Yesterday, I was chattel. Today, we are on a first-name basis. Yesterday, you were untested.
Today.
She smiled, revealing those marginally too sharp teeth. Today, you have proven yourself worthy of consideration. Consideration for what? Lyra rose from the bed, wrapping herself in a translucent robe that did little to conceal her stunning figure. She walked to a hovering crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of something that shimmered like liquid starlight. I have a proposition for you, she said, returning to the bed and handing him a glass, one that could benefit us both. Kalen took the offered drink, noting how their fingers brushed in the exchange. I am listening. Once per week, you shall come to my chambers. We shall spend the night together, exploring this unique compatibility we seem to share. She took a sip of her drink, watching him over the rim of her glass. In return, you shall have relative freedom within the palace. After 1 rotation, if you have proven consistently satisfying, you shall be granted complete freedom. And if I decline? Then you will be terminated immediately, she stated matter-of-factly. I cannot permit someone who knows my intimate predilections to roam freely in the galaxy. Kalen swirled the luminescent liquid in his glass. Once per week for a rotation. That is quite a commitment. Are you implying you wouldn't be up for it? There was a challenge in her voice. He laughed. I am up for it. I am merely wondering what is in it for you, beyond the obvious. You could have any being in the galaxy in your bed. Why continue returning to the same Terran? Lyra's expression turned pensive. Because none of them perceived me as you do. They perceived a sovereign, a deity, a monster to be feared. You. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. You see a woman. A dangerous, powerful, incredibly sexy woman, Kalen appended, earning another genuine laugh from her. So, do we have an accord? She extended her hand, formal despite their intimate setting. Kalen took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he brought it to his lips. Accord. Though I have one stipulation. You are in no position to make stipulations, she reminded him, though her tone remained playful. Hear me out. Once per week is our formal arrangement, but if you find yourself desiring companionship on other nights, I would like the freedom to accept or decline without it affecting our accord. Lyra's eyes widened marginally. You think I would want? I think, he interrupted, setting aside his glass and drawing her closer, that we both know this isn't just about physical gratification anymore. There is something else here, something worth exploring. She didn't pull away. And what might that be? Chemistry. Connection. The kind of spark that renders the universe a little more intriguing. He brushed a strand of platinum hair from her face. Tell me I am wrong. For a protracted moment, she said nothing, just studied his face with those piercing eyes. Then, slowly, she smiled. You are either the bravest or the most foolish Terran I have ever encountered. Why not both? He grinned. Why not, indeed? She leaned in, her lips barely brushing his. Very well. I accept your stipulation, but remember, Kalen Vane, you are playing a hazardous game. The best ones usually are, he murmured against her lips as they sealed their accord with a kiss that swiftly escalated into something more. Kalen knew he had just committed himself to the most exhilarating and potentially lethal rotation of his existence. But as Lyra's cool digits traced patterns on his skin, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. After all, he had already survived one night with a legendary voracious sovereign. How arduous could a rotation be? The answer, as it turned out, would surprise them both. 3 astrocycles into their arrangement, Kalen found himself in an unexpected position, both literally and figuratively. He stood beside Sovereign Lyra's throne during a diplomatic reception, no longer dressed in rags but in a tailored obsidian uniform with silver trim that marked him as part of the royal household. His beard was now neatly trimmed, his raven locks tamed into something that could almost pass for courtly fashion. The whispers followed him everywhere, the Terran consort. They say he's lasted longer than any other. Did you hear she calls for him almost every night now? How does he survive her appetite? Kalen maintained his stoic expression, though his lips twitched slightly at some of the more creative rumors. The truth was far more intriguing than any of their speculations. Yes, their weekly encounters had become more frequent, but not for the reasons the court assumed. "You are smirking again," Lyra murmured, barely moving her lips as she acknowledged another noble's bow.
"What amuses you this time?"
"Just overheard Lady Vex telling the proconsul that I must be using illicit enhancement substances to keep up with you," he whispered back. "Apparently, I am smuggling them in through my beard." Lyra's laugh transmuted into a diplomatic cough. "Well, that's a new one. Though I must concede, your natural abilities continue to surprise me."
"Only continue?"
Here I thought I was exceeding expectations. Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of High Chancellor Forlag, a towering serpentine being whose scales shifted in hue with his moods. Currently, they were an interesting shade of disapproving purple. "Your Radiance," he bowed deeply, pointedly ignoring Kalen. "The Council of Elders requests an audience regarding your unusual domestic arrangements." Lyra's temperature dropped several degrees, literally, as her species could modulate their body heat. "My domestic arrangements are not the Council's concern, Chancellor. With respect, Your Radiance, when those arrangements involve a Terran pleasure thrall attending state functions." "Former thrall," Kalen corrected pleasantly. "Current royal consort, though I favor entertainment specialist. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The Chancellor's scales turned an alarming shade of crimson. This is precisely the problem. He displays no proper reverence, no comprehension of his place.
"His place, huh?"
Lyra cut in, her voice sharp as winter frost. "Is precisely where I wish it to be. Or perhaps you'd like to suggest where else my royal consort should stand." The emphasis she placed on royal consort sent a ripple through the nearby courtiers. It was the first time she had used the title publicly. Chancellor Forlag's scales faded to a sickly yellow. "Your Radiance, surely you cannot intend to legitimize this arrangement?"
"I can, and I have."
"Kalen Vane has proven himself worthy of his position through merit, loyalty, and—" She paused, a subtle smile playing at her lips, "exceptional service to the crown." Kalen bit back a grin at the double entendre. Their private jokes had become one of his favorite parts of their relationship, along with the moments when Lyra let her guard down completely, showing him the woman behind the sovereign. The reception continued, but the whispers took on a different tone. The Terran who had commenced as a pleasure thrall was now officially the sovereign's consort. It was unprecedented, scandalous, and utterly thrilling to the gossip-hungry court. Later that night, in the privacy of her chambers, Lyra paced while Kalen lounged on their favorite chaise lounge. "You realize what I have done?" she asked, running her fingers through her platinum hair. "I have basically announced to the entire court that you are more than that, that we are.
"What?"
Kalen prompted, enjoying her rare moment of uncertainty. She ceased pacing and fixed him with those argent eyes. "That I care for you, that this is not just about physical gratification anymore, that somehow you, insufferable Terran, you have rendered yourself essential to me." Kalen stood and walked to her, taking her cool hands in his warm ones. "Is that such a terrible thing?" "It is perilous," she whispered, "for both of us. The council, the noble houses, they will perceive it as weakness. They will attempt to exploit it against us. Let them try." He pulled her closer. "You are the most powerful being I have ever encountered, Lyra, and I am not precisely helpless myself."
"Togeter, via Strongertan apart."
She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "When did you become so wise?" "Probably around the same time you started becoming more human." She pulled back to glare at him, but there was no genuine heat in it. "I am not becoming human." "No?" he grinned. "Then why did I catch you humming that Earth song I taught you in the bath yesterday?" "Research," she said primly.
"No sai enemi ent alzet."
"Enemy?" He raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we are calling it now?" Instead of answering, she kissed him, effectively terminating the conversation as they moved toward the bed. Kalen reflected on how far they had traversed from that initial night, when he had anticipated perishing. Now, death was the furthest thing from his mind. The whispers in the court might amplify, the challenges might become greater, but in this moment, with Lyra in his arms, Kalen knew they would confront whatever came next together. And if anyone had a problem with that, well, they would soon learn why Terrans had a reputation for being unstoppable when safeguarding what they loved. The ancient temple of lunar benediction glowed with bioluminescent crystals, casting ethereal patterns across the assembled nobility. Kalen stood beside Lyra at the temple's entrance, both adorned in traditional ceremonial attire, he in flowing silver robes that complemented his sun-kissed skin, she in a diaphanous gown of pale blue that made her opalescent skin seem to shimmer. "Remind me again why we are doing this," Kalen whispered, eyeing the ornate altar ahead. "The fertility rites are sacred to my people," Lyra replied, her fingers intertwining with his. "As sovereign, I must participate in the ceremony with my chosen consort to ensure the prosperity of our realm. And the fact that it's essentially a public blessing of royal coupling doesn't bother you?" Her lips curved into that familiar, enigmatic smile. "My people possess dissimilar views on intimacy than Terrans. Here, it is a celebration of life, power, and continuation." The high priestess approached, her robes rippling like liquid moonlight. "Your radiance, the astral convergences align. We must commence." The ceremony was unlike anything Kalen had experienced. Incense saturated the air with sweet, intoxicating aromas. Crystalline chimes resonated in harmonic patterns that seemed to vibrate with his very bones. The high priestess guided them through ancient rituals, speaking in a language that seemed to dance between sound and light. But it was the way Lyra gazed at him that stole his breath away. Her argent eyes held something novel: vulnerability, trust, and perhaps something deeper that neither of them had dared to name as yet. "The sacred oils," the priestess announced, presenting an iridescent vial, "to bless the union and unlock the pathways of creation." As the oil was applied to their foreheads, Kalen felt a curious warmth permeate his body. Lyra gasped softly beside him, her skin taking on a subtle glow. "The oils enhance natural compatibility," she elucidated in a whisper. "They are said to align life forces." "Is that what we are calling it now?" he teased, earning a gentle elbow to his ribs. The ceremony proceeded, building in intensity. The assembled nobles watched with rapt attention as their sovereign and her Terran consort completed each ritualistic step. Some appeared scandalized, others intrigued, but all seemed amazed at how naturally they moved together. Finally, the high priestess raised her arms. "The benediction is complete. May the sacred chambers witness your union and grant the realm its future." They were led to a private chamber deep within the temple, its walls lined with the same bioluminescent crystals that seemed to pulsate in rhythm with their heartbeats. Once alone, Lyra turned to Kalen. "The oils, they are affecting you differently than anticipated." "Good differently or bad differently?"
"1% different."
She placed a hand on his chest, her eyes widening. "Your life force. It is incredibly potent. Most species can barely tolerate the enhancement, but you—" "Well, you know us Terrans," he grinned, pulling her closer. "We are full of surprises." Their connection that night was unlike any before. The sacred oils amplified every sensation, every touch, every shared breath. The temple's ancient magic seemed to weave around them, binding them in ways neither had anticipated. Hours later, as they lay entwined in the ceremonial chamber, Lyra traced patterns on Kalen's chest. "The council will not be pleased about what occurred." "About what, specifically?" "The ceremony? The oils? The fact that their sovereign chose a Terran consort. About what the crystals revealed." She propped herself up on one elbow, her platinum tresses cascading over her shoulders. "They are recording crystals, Kalen. They measure compatibility, potential, life force alignment. No pairing in recorded history has ever made them glow that brightly." Kalen sat up, suddenly alert. "What does that signify?" "It signifies," she said slowly, "that according to our most sacred measurements, you and I are not just compatible, we are optimal. Perfect for creation."
"Creation?"
As in continuing the royal line." She bit her lip, an endearingly human gesture she'd picked up from him. "The crystals indicate we could conceive a human-Lyran hybrid. It has never been done before." Kalen absorbed this information, his mind racing. "Is that something you desire?" "I never thought it was possible," she admitted. "My species, we rarely reproduce successfully, even amongst our own kind. It is why the fertility rites are so important. But with you." She placed his hand over her abdomen. "The crystals do not lie, Kalen. We could make history." We seem to be doing that a lot lately, he said softly, pulling her close. First Terran to survive your bedchamber, first Terran consort, and now potentially the first to father a hybrid royal heir. Are you afraid? Terrified, he admitted with a laugh, but also exhilarated. Though I have to ask, is this just about continuing the royal line, Lyra? Lyra was silent for a moment, then spoke so softly he almost missed it. No. It is about continuing us. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. They had come so far from their initial arrangement, from thrall and sovereign to something neither of them had expected to find. Well then, Kaelin said, kissing her deeply, let's make some history. News of the fertility rite's unprecedented results spread through the palace like wildfire. The recording crystal's brilliant reaction to Kaelin and Lyra's compatibility became the talk of every noble house, spawning both wonder and worry throughout the realm. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Kaelin found Lyra in her private study, surrounded by ancient scrolls. Her usual composed demeanor seemed slightly off. She had been experiencing waves of dizziness and temperature fluctuations that weren't normal for her species. The Royal Archives finally released these, she said without looking up, prophecies dating back to the First Dynasty. And Kaelin. She lifted her argent eyes to meet his. You need to see this. He moved behind her chair, placing his hands on her shoulders. The scroll she indicated was written in shimmering ink that seemed to move on the page. The translation beneath read, when astral convergences align and barriers fall, a child of 2 worlds shall heed the call. Born of ice and burning flame, the realm shall never be the same. Power unprecedented, change unforeseen, through union of warrior and queen. Well, that's not ominous at all, Kaelin commented, massaging her tense shoulders. Though ice and burning flame is a bit on the nose, considering your natural body temperature and mine. There's more, Lyra said, her voice unusually tight. The prophecy speaks of this child either bringing about a golden age or... She swallowed hard. The complete dissolution of everything we know. That's quite a range of possibilities. He moved around to face her. But something else is bothering you, isn't it? She stood abruptly, swaying slightly. Kaelin steadied her with strong hands. I have been feeling different, she admitted. The royal physician confirmed it this morning. I am with child, Kaelin. Our child. The world seemed to stop for a moment, then Kaelin broke into a broad grin, lifting her off her feet in a very unsovereign-like display of joy. That's wonderful. Is it? She didn't resist his embrace, but worry lined her face. The prophecy, it's ancient and vague. Like all prophecies, he interrupted, but our child, that's real, that's now. A knock at the door interrupted them. The high priestess entered, her face grave. Your Radiance, Lord Consort, forgive the intrusion, but we have discovered something disturbing. She held out a small vial of shifting purple liquid. This was found in the Sovereign's evening tea. It is a fertility-blocking poison, designed to prevent the prophecy from coming true. Had her Radiance not already conceived, it would have made further attempts impossible. Kaelin's joy transmuted to rage. Who? House Vex, the priestess replied. They have long opposed the mixing of royal blood with other species. But there is more. They have allied with 3 other noble houses to challenge your rule, your Radiance. They claim that carrying a hybrid child renders you unfit to rule. Lyra's temperature dropped dangerously low, her species equivalent of anger. They dare. My love, Kaelin said softly, using the endearment for the first time in public. Remember what we discussed about Terran approaches to problem-solving? A slight smile curved her lips. You mean your philosophy of hitting them so hard they never think of getting up again? Precisely. He turned to the priestess. Summon the royal guard. I think it's time for a demonstration of why Terrans have a reputation for being protective of their families. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Kaelin, drawing on his military background, a part of his history he'd never explained, coordinated with the royal guard. Lyra, despite his protests, insisted on being part of the operation. I am not some delicate flower, she reminded him as they prepared. I am still the sovereign who was legendary for her insatiability, remember? He couldn't argue with that. The raid on House Vex compound was swift and decisive. Kaelin led from the front, his combat skills shocking the conspirators who had dismissed him as merely the sovereign's plaything. Lyra's power, combined with her newfound protective fury over their unborn child, was terrifying to behold. By dawn, the rebellion was crushed. The loyal houses, impressed by the display of both strength and mercy, the conspirators were imprisoned rather than executed, Lyra's newfound humanity showing through pledged renewed allegiance to the crown. In their private chambers afterward, Kaelin held Lyra close, still worried about the prophecy. A little, she admitted, but I am starting to think maybe the change unforeseen isn't about destruction. Maybe it is about evolution. Look how much we have both changed already. Speaking of change, he said, placing a hand on her still flat abdomen, any idea what we are in for? I mean, has there ever been a human Lyran pregnancy before? She laughed.
No.
But given how you have exceeded expectations in everything else, I am sure our child will be extraordinary. Like their mother, he murmured, kissing her deeply. And their father, she added when they came up for air. Though we should probably discuss how to handle the next 8 months. My species typically carries for 12 months, but with Terran genetics involved. We will figure it out, he assured her. We always do. As they lay together in the pre-dawn light, both contemplating the future they'd created, Kaelin couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come, from a death sentence hanging over his head to creating new life that might reshape an entire empire. Not bad for a former pleasure thrall who had simply decided to enjoy his last night alive. The news of Sovereign Lyra's unprecedented pregnancy spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. Within weeks, the palace found itself hosting delegations from dozens of alien species, all eager to witness what many were calling the evolution miracle. Kaelin stood at the window of their private chambers, watching as yet another diplomatic vessel descended through the atmosphere, its hull gleaming with the distinctive iridescent markings of the stellar concordant. That makes 17 different species this week alone, he mused, adjusting the formal attire he'd been required to wear as Lord Consort. The black and silver uniform still felt strange compared to his old worn clothing, but he had to admit, it cut an impressive figure. 18, Lyra corrected, emerging from their bathing chamber. Her pregnancy had begun showing slightly, giving her an ethereal glow that made her even more stunning. The crystalline collective arrived an hour ago. She wore a new style of her signature black and gold dress, modified to accommodate her changing form while maintaining her regal appearance. The way she moved, graceful yet powerful, still took his breath away. The crystalline collective? I thought they never left their home system. They didn't, she smiled, coming to stand beside him, until now. Apparently, the possibility of human-alien hybridization has sparked what they call a paradigm shift in evolutionary theory. Kaelin wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his hands on her growing belly. And here I thought I was just trying not to get executed. Instead, you've revolutionized galactic society. She leaned back against him, her cooler body temperature a pleasant contrast to his warmth. Though I must say, your methods of avoiding execution were thoroughly enjoyable. He corrected, nuzzling her neck. Present tense. Very much present tense. A discreet cough from the doorway interrupted them. Their chief advisor, Meridian, stood there with an apologetic expression. Forgive me, Your Radiance, Lord Consort, but the Stellar Concordance delegation requests an immediate audience. They claim to have important information regarding the prophecy. Lyra straightened instantly, reverting to her queenly bearing. Very well. The main audience chamber in 20 minutes. After Meridian left, Kaelin raised an eyebrow. Important information about the prophecy? That's novel. Usually, they just want to study us, or propose alliances, or offer obscene amounts of resources for the rights to study our child. Lyra added with a touch of frost in her voice. The previous week, the Mertile Federation had attempted to negotiate exclusive research rights to their unborn child's genetic material. Kaelin's response had been colorfully negative. The audience chamber was packed with representatives from various species when they arrived. The Stellar Concordance delegation stood out, tall ethereal beings with skin like starlit night and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Your Radiance, Lord Consort, their leader bowed with fluid grace. I am first speaker Aliana. We bring revelations from our archive of universal constants. Proceed, Lyra commanded from her throne, Kaelin standing at her right hand. The prophecy you discovered is incomplete, Sovereign, Aliana announced. It is but one part of a greater prediction, one that spans multiple species and eons. We believe your child represents a crucial junction point in galactic evolution. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Kalen stepped forward.
Explain.
For millennia, species have evolved in isolation, developing unique traits and abilities. But nature seeks balance, harmony, synthesis. Your union, Eliana gestured to both of them, represents the first successful crossing of what were thought to be insurmountable biological barriers. Because Terrans are too stubborn to accept limitations, Kalen quipped, earning a subtle elbow from Lyra. Because Terrans possess an adaptability that defies conventional evolutionary theory, Eliana corrected. Your species' genetic flexibility, combined with your remarkable compatibility with other species, suggests you are meant to be a catalyst for the next stage of galactic evolution. And our child, Lyra's hand rested protectively on her abdomen, will be the first of a new kind of being, one that bridges not just two species, but potentially all sentient life. The prophecy speaks of change unforeseen, yes, but also of unity unprecedented. The implications were staggering. Kalen exchanged a look with Lyra, seeing his own mix of wonder and concern reflected in her steel-gray eyes. Of course, Eliana continued with a diplomatic smile, such a momentous development requires careful study and protection. The Stellar Concordant would be honored to join the long list of those offering to help study our child? Kalen interrupted, his voice carrying a warning edge. The answer remains no. But surely, you understand the scientific importance. What I understand, Kalen said firmly, is that every species in the galaxy suddenly has an opinion about our family. But let me be clear, our child is not an experiment, not a research subject, and not a political bargaining chip. Lyra rose from her throne, her presence commanding attention. We appreciate the information about the prophecy, first speaker, but my consort speaks truth. Our child will be born into love and protection, not scientific scrutiny. The Concordant delegation looked disappointed but not surprised as they withdrew. Kalen heard one of them mutter, "Typical Terran protective instincts." "Damn right," he whispered, making Lyra smile. Later, in their private gardens, they discussed the revelations. "Do you think they're right?" Lyra asked, resting against him on their favorite bench. "About our child being some sort of evolutionary key?" "I think," Kalen said thoughtfully, "that our child will be exactly what they are meant to be, whether that is a galaxy-changing catalyst or just our kid who happens to have your beauty and my charm." "And your modesty," she teased.
Hey, modesty got me executed in the original plan, remember?
"I'll stick with confidence." She laughed, then grew serious. "Kalen, I am glad it was you. Not just for surviving that first night, but for everything since, for showing me there was more to life than power and control, for giving me a future I never imagined possible." He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and devotion into the gesture. When they finally parted, he smiled. "Well, you know what they say about Terrans."
What's that?
"We are full of surprises." The hybrid pregnancy proved as unique as the couple themselves. At 8 astrocycles, a compromise between Terran and Lyran gestation periods, the palace buzzed with anticipation. Lyra's pregnancy had brought unexpected changes to both parents. Her typically cool body temperature had risen to match Kalen's Terran warmth, while he had developed an uncanny ability to sense her emotions across distances. "The blending goes both ways," the royal physician explained, amazed by their transformations. "Your bodies are adapting to each other at a cellular level. It's unprecedented." Kalen stood at Lyra's bedside in the birthing chamber, their hands intertwined. The past month had deepened their connection beyond anything either had imagined possible. Their initial arrangement once a week for a rotation in exchange for freedom seemed like a distant dream from another life. "Remember when you were going to execute me?" Kalen teased, wiping sweat from her brow with his free hand. "Remember when you were just a thrall meant to satisfy my legendary insatiability?" she countered, managing a smile despite her discomfort. "Oh, I still satisfy that quite thoroughly," he winked, making her laugh despite the contractions. The birth itself was remarkable. As their son entered the world, the ancient crystals throughout the palace pulsed with light, acknowledging the arrival of something new in the universe. The child had Kalen's sun-kissed skin tone, but with an underlying luminescence that gave him an ethereal glow. His hair was a striking mix of his father's raven curls and his mother's starlight white, creating an effect like the galaxy itself had been woven into his locks. His eyes, when they opened, were the same argent as his mother's but with flecks of warm brown from his father. "He's perfect," Lyra whispered, cradling their son. "What shall we name him?" Kaelin looked at their child, this miracle that had transformed not just their lives, but potentially the course of galactic evolution. In Terran tradition, names often carry meaning or hopes for the future. "In our tradition as well," Lyra nodded. "Though I think Terran names might be too simple for what he represents." After discussion, they settled on Lien, a name that in the ancient Lyran tongue meant bridge between stars. It seemed fitting for a child who bridged not just two species, but potentially all of galactic civilization. As news of the successful birth spread, celebrations erupted across the Empire and beyond. The prophecy's words about change unforeseen began to make sense as reports came in of other successful human-alien partnerships following their example. Their love had quite literally changed the course of evolution. One rotation to the day after their first meeting, Kaelin and Lyra stood on their private balcony watching the triple moons rise while Lien slept peacefully in his nursery. "Your rotation of service is officially up," Lyra said softly. "According to our original agreement, you are now free to go." Kaelin pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent. "I think we both know I stopped being here because of that agreement a long time ago." "Oh." She turned in his arms, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Then why did you stay?" "Well, there was this insatiably beautiful sovereign who needed satisfying," he began, making her laugh. "But mostly, I stayed because somewhere between trying not to die and changing the galaxy, I fell completely in love with you. Even though I was going to have you executed? Especially because of that. Nothing says true love like surviving an execution order." He kissed her deeply, still amazed at how perfectly they fit together. "Besides, someone needs to keep teaching you about humanity." "I think I've learned quite a bit," she murmured against his lips. "Though I could always use more practical demonstrations." "Your radiance, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I am suggesting," she said, pulling him toward their chambers, "that while I may no longer be the tyrannical sovereign who executes her unsatisfying lovers, I am still rather insatiable when it comes to you." "Thank the stars for that," Kaelin grinned, following her lead. "Though I have to ask, do you ever regret not executing me that first night?" Lyra stopped and turned to him, her expression serious despite the passion in her eyes. "Kaelin, that night you didn't just satisfy me, you awakened something in me I didn't know existed: love, compassion, the ability to see beyond power and control. You gave me a son, a future, and a heart. Executing you would have been the biggest mistake of my life. Plus," he added with a roguish smile, "the sex is amazing." She laughed and pulled him into their chambers. "That too, my love. That too." As the doors closed behind them, Kaelin reflected on how far they had come from a death sentence hanging over his head to becoming the catalyst for galactic evolution, from a pleasure thrall to a beloved consort and father, from satisfying an insatiable sovereign to finding insatiable love. Not bad for a guy who'd just been trying to enjoy his last night alive.